what's up, y'all? I know you've had a busy couple days, so I'm going to talk a little bit something broader, just about the general topic of location. You know about Yik Yak if you're on college, probably, but I won't talk too much about that. So, you might hear me reference the local graph a good bit. And when you hear me talk about this, what it means is this network of the people, the places, the things around you. So imagine you're on Yelp, you're looking at the local graph of restaurants around you, you're on Yik Yak, you're talking to the local graph of people around you, et cetera, et cetera. So you'll hear me talk about that throughout. Of course, we know the internet. Hopefully you do, at least. With the internet, you get more open information sharing, and it connects people, of course. But only recently, this is really fascinating, have we started tapping into the local graph using the internet. And I'll walk through a couple examples of that. I'm very excited to see how it's continuing to grow. So we'll cover a couple things. One, we'll look a couple thousand years back, go through some history. Welcome to history class. I thought you were getting out of school this weekend, but no, you're back. And we'll dive into how is location used, why do we use location-based services, what are some of the technical challenges and exciting problems to solve involving location, and also what does the future hold for us. So let's go thousands of years back. No matter where you are in the world, you're always in a location, and there's always a graph of people around you and things around you. So in the cave times, that was just your tribe. Those are just the people you talk to. You know, they're a couple, at most, miles away, maybe. It's all verbal communication. And then towns and villages get created, and you get meeting spots where you go and have verbal communication. You need to coordinate when you meet there. So maybe, hey, meet at the pub at high noon. 12 is a little early to start drinking, but maybe you still meet there around then. And then people start to learn to read and write. And so people post on bulletin boards, you know, messages about where to find things, who to call if you need to get this fixed, that fixed, or you can start sending mail to each other. And then you get some really cool technology coming down the road. Local newspapers, for example, you can take the written word and in a systematic way distribute it to hundreds and thousands of people in an area. And that's when you start to get really cool coordinated communication. And then you look at how can you make that faster. With phones and phone books, you can now look up anyone, look up the local plumber, you know, the roof repairman, the veterinarian, start looking them up, calling them, coordinating stuff. And then you get local TV, news broadcasts, local commercials, et cetera. You get really visual distribution at a wide scale of local information. So that's kind of a look back. We're going to take a look forward to when the internet comes into play. Who here remembers 20 years ago? I don't even think some of y'all were even alive. So I'm dating myself a little bit, but 20 years ago, you might be part of an email group, an email newsletter that gets distributed. I don't know if anyone knows GeoCities. Yeah, shout out. Way back in the day. Those are the cutting edge of the internet. We've come a long way since then. But back then, there was a sentiment around location and internet. And who thinks these quotes kind of look familiar? So, don't put any information about yourself online. Don't talk to anyone online. Do not meet up with anyone online for sure. Everyone online is like stranger danger. Stay away. I remember my mom telling me, Tyler, don't you dare talk to someone online. Don't even put your zip code online, et cetera. Location and meeting people from the internet, that's the scary place of the internet. It didn't feel safe. It was the unknown. We didn't know who was behind it. You know if there was a dog behind the computer screen or a person, for example. And we always felt it ate away at our privacy, our safety. So we're going to play a little game. Hopefully some of y'all get this reference. In the words of Saul, I want to play a game. I'm going to give y'all some premises and see if you can guess the app or the company I'm talking about. So we'll start with this one. You're at a sketchy Waffle House parking lot, meeting a stranger that you found online. You're going to hand them money, and they're going to hand you an item. And there's a clue, a little visual clue. Craigslist, yes, nicely done. All right, so yeah, you find people nearby to buy and sell items with. Even new apps have emerged. I think there's Local 5, 5 Miles, eBay Local, Amazon Local, et cetera. There's even more ways than Craigslist to start meeting people to buy and sell items with. Nice thing about this is you can view the item in person beforehand. You don't have to pay for shipping costs. You don't have to pay for returning it if it's damaged or whatever. So Craigslist is one. All right, next one. I'm going to show you pictures of a stranger. They might answer a couple questions about themselves, and maybe y'all grab drinks later. You might get intimate, and you might even date. Tinder. Here's a clue. Match game. So on Tinder, Bumble, et cetera, you match people. So now it's crazy. People are meeting people online, grabbing coffee, drinks, marrying them, et cetera. Fun story. This is my brother at his wedding day, and he met his wife on Tinder, and they're both relatively normal people. So it's crazy how the cultural norms have shifted in from stranger dangers online to meet, the love of your life online. All right, another one. I'm a stranger and I want to sleep in your apartment. You say, that is awesome. Text me when you get there. The key is in the little planter under the mat. Yes. Feel free to sleep in my bed. Look at all the pictures of my family as you eat breakfast, etc. So here's the worst that can happen. You do that, you get a messy house, etc. But here's what actually happens today. You get an awesome brand with an awesome just feeling of like community when you stay at someone's house. People treat each other nicely, and Airbnb, as you said. It's really cool. It leverages this graph of just everyday people, everyday things, houses, apartments, and turns it into a way that disrupts an entire industry. And because it provides a cheaper, more distributed network of housing. Another one. All right, there's a stranger outside. He's sitting in a car. He might have candy inside. And you're going to hop in, and he'll know where to go. You don't even need to talk to him, etc. Uber and Lyft. So here's a clue. And yeah, Uber, Lyft. So that's what could happen. This is what happens today. You have these great brands with international recognition and a great experience from beginning to end of hopping in a stranger's car and going exactly where you need to go. Just like Airbnb, it's going to leverage a network of everyday people and things and their assets to provide a more distributed service at a better cost, et cetera. And it's going to disrupt the industry that as we've known it up until today. So here's a bunch of other examples of location-based services. Many of y'all have probably played Pokemon Go. If you haven't, you should. It's fun. Lyft, Craigslist, Thumbtack, we heard from Marco earlier, Tinder, Yelp, geocaching, Uber, Yik Yak, of course, Airbnb, Foursquare, Waze, Nextdoor. The list goes on of ways we as consumers use location-based services, tap into the local graph, consume local data. However, we're not the only ones getting a benefit out of this. Companies that are providing these sorts of location-based services are getting a lot of value out of it too. It's a two-way street. So the data behind all your usage of these apps is very valuable, and we can learn a lot from them as a company, as a data company, et cetera. You can target ads more. You can learn about the user. So there's a couple examples of that too, hopefully not to scare y'all. So if I was to ask you, where did you spend 2 to 4 a.m. every Tuesday through Thursday for the last 4 weeks, would I know your home address? You don't have to call your home address, but usually that's like a rule of thumb. With a 99% accuracy, I can know your exact home address, which is kind of scary. But don't be freaked out. I'm not tracking that. Another one, Uber's Rides of Glory blog post. Has anyone read of that, heard of that? Yeah, so Uber was looking at ride data and rides you were taking at certain times from certain places to other certain places, your ride history, and they could tell when you're having one-night stands. And furthermore, they published a blog post about this in a couple cities. Obviously, the blog post does not exist today. It was taken down, but you can find a cached version online somewhere. So you can tell a lot from location data, location history, et cetera. A really cool business example, Foursquare predicted iPhone sales This was last year in 2015, just by looking at the foot traffic data they collect. I think they said on the first day iPhones were available, Apple sold 13 million iPhones. And then a couple days, weeks, months later, when Apple announces how much they sold, they're like, we sold 13 million iPhones on the first day. So it's really cool to use this location data for business intelligence, but it can get a little creepy when you see how much these companies can know about you. So there's kind of one question you need to answer. Does the utility I'm getting from these services outweigh the privacy, the safety that I'm giving up? And by answering that question, seeing which one's more, you see whether or not you want to use the service. Here's a couple examples, apps we use, and why we use them in a very blatant way. So Lyft saves us money, cheaper than a taxi, cheaper than calling a limo, whatever. So you can just call Lyft, get a cheap ride somewhere. Waze saves us time, taps into your local graph of other drivers around you, and saves you time and lets you know when an accident's coming down the road, makes your commute home a little quicker. Snapchat geo-filters. You're willing to give Snapchat your location, because now when you're putting filters on your pictures, yes, the dog faces are fun, the throw-up rainbow are fun, but being able to tag this picture here with Hell's Kitchen is pretty cool. Yik Yak, for example, gives you really quick access to your community. Imagine you're a freshman on campus, you know 0 people, maybe you know your roommate, y'all have some awkward conversations, but you hop on Yik Yak and you're instantly connected to thousands of people and can chat with them about anything. Google Keep reminders. This is really cool. These are ones where as you travel, go through your day, and you go by a place, they'll remind you, hey, pick up milk. You're going by Kroger, etc. And then, of course, Pokemon Go. You're giving these random game companies access to your location, so you can get these really immersive game experiences. Of course, solving for location hasn't been easy, and maybe this is why a lot of location-based services have been on the increase lately. Battery life, GPS signal, privacy concerns. A lot of these have been solved lately, which is cool. You can see an old school phone right here with a massive battery. Phones today are way smaller and even have a much longer battery life. GPS signal used to consume so much battery, used to be not even that accurate. Today it's very accurate, can get down to a couple feet very easily. And then privacy concern. You don't want that information leaking out, people tracking you, stalking you, etc. Anybody know where this picture is from? What movie? Wall Street, nice. I figured it'd be relevant since we're in New York. Cool, but a couple problems have been solved. It's still a very exciting tech challenge. One is converting these raw GPS coordinates. Hey, you're at negative 37.123, comma, negative 84 dot 234. Converting that into actually where are you in the world? Like, not just on a map where you are, but like what place are you at? For example, I'm standing here, and I look at my GPS, am I at Metropolitan West? Am I getting my car washed, or am I eating donuts at the donut shop next door? And that becomes even harder as you're inside. Do we use GPS? Do we use Wi-Fi access points? Do we use Bluetooth beacons, etc.? It's a very challenging problem. What if you're in a skyscraper in New York with 50 floors? What floor am I on? What office am I at? Very cool problems to solve. Another one, how do you account for dynamic things? Location data and getting that onto a map can be difficult, especially if it's always changing. Or if there's a pop-up restaurant, around the block, or an event, a concert, for example, food trucks that are pulling up later today. Wouldn't that be awesome to look at a map and see that, like right now? There's some really cool companies. Yext is doing a great job pulling together location data and everything, trying to unify it, which is really cool to see people working on this. Another one, AR. I mean, if you use Pokemon Go, you see how technology is starting to blend with the real world. If now we start to bring more and more AR and the camera into our lives, and you're looking at things to identify it, these can be tough because places change. There might be a big truck parked in front. It could be night, could be day, could be a different season. Not everything looks the same. So it's tough to identify a place you're at with just a visual. So where are we headed from here? Obviously, we're going to continue to use location services. You've probably seen the number of apps on your phone that access location has gone up. I remember just a couple years ago, it was maybe Foursquare and the Maps. And now it's almost every app on the phone. So with that, we're getting more comfortable with divulging information about ourselves, our own location data. I think we're largely past that. People have done a good job keeping our information private, and we're okay with that. We're going to start getting more comfortable letting strangers who are in our local graph into our life. We've done a good job with ride-sharing services, house-sharing services like Airbnb. But now you've seen more and more services popping up: dog walking, laundry, house cleaning. I want to see the food industry solved. I think that one's cool. I live in an apartment building with hundreds of people. What if I could just pay someone $2 for a plate of warm spaghetti tonight? Stuff like that. I think we'll get more comfortable bringing these strangers in our community into our lives. And then we're also, as we get more and more of these, we're using more of these, we're going to hit limits that are limited by human capital. If everyone in New York wanted to ride today on Lyft, there's only so many drivers. How do you support that? So you're going to have to see some technology that mimics and simulates this human capital. Does anybody think of an idea revolving around ride-sharing services that does this? What about self-driving cars? Now you don't even need the human driver to act like the human inside the car. These things will drive themselves, and you're no longer limited by the amount of humans that are driving. So it's pretty cool to see, now that we have a bunch of humans in these services, now we're saying, how do we get more nodes on this graph to provide services? Has anybody here seen the show Black Mirror? Yeah? Have you seen the episode White Christmas with John Hamm? So it's pretty cool. I think everyone has like a contact lens installed in their eye, and you look at people, you recognize them or identify them, you even block them so you don't see them, they don't see you type stuff. It's pretty crazy that I don't think this is too far in the future, maybe not the implanted contact lens. That probably is far in the future, but like goggles or glasses you wear. You saw Snapchat released spectacles. But what about Magic Leap or other companies that are working on AR really heavily? That's going to make the consumption of stuff around us like much more easy. You can look at anything, any place, any person, and maybe see information about it. I think a huge privacy debate is going to happen there. What if I could look at each and every one of you and like above it says your name, your profession, whatever? That'd be kind of creepy at a level. But then you have to answer that question, does utility outweigh privacy concerns? And we'll see, because 10 years ago, the thought of Lyft, it was like, people kind of were like, oh, that's crazy. And now it's today, part of everyday culture. One example of this would be, imagine you're in a coffee shop, and you're looking around, you see there's a doctor sitting literally right next to you, and you have a weird bug bite on your leg. And so you interrupt his coffee and say, hey, can you take a look at this? But it's weird stuff like that. Imagine you're a VC sitting in a coffee shop in Palo Alto, and now everyone's coming up to you because they know you're a VC that works at Sequoia. You can't go out in public. So like, is going out in public basically saying, you're free to talk to me, you're free to know everything about me? I think a really cool privacy debate's going to happen around this, and we'll find out, does the utility outweigh the concerns around privacy? So you can see there's tons of awesome things happening with location. It's super powerful, makes our lives better, helps us save time, save money, save effort, makes our lives more efficient, builds more connected communities through apps like Yik Yak, Nextdoor, Yelp, etc. And it's exciting to see so many companies working on this. Just in this building, DoorDash, Thumbtack, Yik Yak, Yext, all working on really cool location-based implementations. And I'm excited to see those continue. But I do want you to have a key takeaway outside of just location. Find something you're passionate about. You can tell I'm passionate about this. I spent a lot of time thinking about this, not just Yik Yak, but how other services are tapping into the local graph and location as a whole. So find a space that you're passionate about and a company that's solving a problem in it. And the cool thing about startups is that startups are going to be the ones, if history tells us anything, that are going to create the most disruptive solutions and disrupt the industries, rewrite the cultural norms, It's going to happen at a startup. It's not going to happen at these big companies. It's going to be the couple people sitting in a room and saying, what if this was possible? Let's go try it. Let's take risks. Let's be crazy. Let's hack stuff together. Then that's when you're going to get it created. And the nice thing about startups is there's no corporate ladder to climb. You join a startup that's solving a problem like this, you're the one at the heart of it, starting these revolutions, rewriting cultural norms. You're the one writing the code, designing the products, you know, et cetera, et cetera. That's the awesome things about startups. You can be hands-on in these revolutions that rewrite cultural norms. And 20 years from now, we're going to laugh at the thought of how people used to think about X, Y, Z, for example. So that's all I have. Open to questions. Hopefully you all enjoyed a brief look into location services. No questions? We got one in the back, and then yeah.
So I go to Georgia Tech, so I'm familiar with Atlanta, and I wanted to know your thoughts about starting in Atlanta and the startup scene that's not the Bay Area or not New York.
Yeah. So I think you all heard the question, the idea of starting in Atlanta. So how we started in Atlanta was, that's where I was from, that's where my co-founder was from. We went to college in South Carolina, moved back, sleeping at our parents' houses, just meeting up at a central location, working on stuff. That's where we started Yik Yak and just got the ball rolling. And as the ball rolled, it was great to us. Atlanta was good. There was a great startup community, obviously not as big as San Francisco or New York, but it was good to us, and then we got some momentum going there. The nice thing is capital is mobile, so if you have an idea, started in Florida, started in Georgia, started in any state, I think capital will find you. Talent, it's not as much in Atlanta and other places as you find in Silicon Valley, but there is good talent everywhere, and more schools are pushing CS. So we were able to find great talent, build a great team. Silicon Valley does have some really cool things happening though, so we opened an office there because there's some inherent advantages of just being in the middle of it. So we have a presence in both places. Both have their advantages, disadvantages. One, you're right in the middle of it. In Atlanta, you can kind of put your heads down and focus on, you know, what you're up to. So each has its pros and cons. Question? Oh.
Why is it called Yik Yak?
Yik Yak. So that came from a name. Let's see. We wanted to encompass the feeling, and we actually just went through this. Right before I got up here and talked, there was a bunch of chatter happening around. It's kind of that buzz in a movie theater before a movie starts and the lights dim. And a small company named Salesforce had an app called Chatter, so we said maybe we don't take that one. So we thought about chit chat. It was a little too common. I asked my parents, and my mom came up with Yik Yak, which I think is maybe from an old song, Yakety Yak, Don't Talk Back. And then my co-founder, who also likes to draw in his spare time, drew a little yak mascot. People love mascots. Snapchat with the ghost, for example. And then we just went with that.
Hi. Yeah, so you guys are expanding internationally now. You guys have had the chance to learn once from the US market. So what lessons have you learned from the US market that you are applying internationally to not make the same mistakes perhaps?
Yeah, let's see. A good lesson we learned was start small. So when we started in the US, we didn't try to get every college using Yik Yak. We started with one, and then another one, and another one, and those were all really closely located. And that served well for us, because the nice thing about location services, as you build up a base of usage in an area, it's very hard to come in and disrupt it. And so we took a very strategic geographical approach, started very small. We're doing the same thing internationally. So we just launched Brazil at the end of August, and we started just with Sao Paulo and just a couple universities there. And once we get that city and those colleges there, we'll expand to the next city. We've taken that approach in a couple other countries as well.
Microphone. Another quick question about Yik Yak is, You know, one of the original draws for the app was anonymity, and over the past couple of months, you guys have shifted from there to handles, to usernames. I was wondering what the rationale was behind that and how that's been going for you.
Yeah, so when we launched the app, location was still like our primary focus. I remember being on like a soccer field with my co-founder Brooks on the other side, and we're like testing how accurate it is and whatnot. And what we wanted to always get was I log on to an app and I'm instantly connected to the community. We used anonymity as a way to eliminate the onboarding process. We launched a previous app actually that had a long onboarding process, and a lot of people just kind of got caught up in that, and we want to just eliminate that and simulate opening up, a newspaper, for example. And so we launched with that, big hit and everything, but we did see is anonymous can limit the amount of relationships and connections you can form. Because at the end of the day, we might have had a great conversation, but I have no idea who you are, you don't know who I am, and it's like, how do we keep this great, friendship relationship going, for example? And so that was why we made the push toward handles, usernames. Like, it doesn't even have to be your real identity. There just needs to be an identifier so you can start to form these awesome communities. And so that's what we've seen. We've seen people start to recognize and form friendships and relationships, and sometimes they're forming group chats offline on WhatsApp or something and forming really close friendships. We've had best friends find each other, people buy and sell stuff, for example, all sorts of really cool things.
I'm over here. What is the impact on removing anonymity been on like user use? And then past that, like what are the next steps for Yik Yak?
Yeah, so it's been cool. We have some goals that are set up around tracking, like how much are people connecting, how are these relationships forming, and those all like multiplied and went up greatly. And that was super exciting to see. So next steps would be taking all these things that are happening on a general level and maybe break it down so you can build even better like communities, micro communities. So say you're at a campus and you're just having a general feed, but what if I want to talk about classes or sports or politics, or I want to buy and sell a textbook? It's kind of hard to do that on the main feed, so we're looking at ways to help you find the relevant conversation easier, find the communities you want to interact with easier within your local area.
So Yik Yak is almost exclusively a university service at this point. What plans do you have, or what goals do you hope to set in the future for moving off campus into the local communities? I mean, that's obviously your motivation, but how are you going to get there?
Yeah, so we're working on really perfecting it in the university campus before we go beyond that. Facebook's a good example of that. And we do have some goals, like look at your apartment complexes you live in or the small neighborhoods you live in a big city. And there's no really good way to communicate in there. There's apps like Nextdoor, but it feels heavy and feels kind of Web 2.0-y, not really the messaging era. We want to bring this like messaging era, almost like the way Slack, reworked how people communicate at work, not just email now, it's like a messaging application for work. We want to take that and bring it into these communities. So apartment complexes, boroughs, et cetera, but probably that post-grad market first as we get really big brand ambassadors graduating as seniors and going into that first job, that first city where they don't know anyone. They can be a great way to expand outside of college.
So the idea you're talking about giving up certain privacy or information for utility, I know that, do you think that's something that's kind of localized to certain cultures? Like I know, for example, in some places in Europe, when Google tried to do the street view with taking pictures of the car, they were like chased out and like, they would, would throw stuff at the car because they just didn't want like the pictures of the streets everywhere. They didn't want people to be able to find that out. Do you think that this is like an inevitable thing that's going to happen, or do you think it's something that's going to be more localized to certain cultures, like say like certain countries or certain areas of the country, depending on the local culture?
I think it goes back to that question of like utility versus like privacy. So like in Europe, they'll have Uber and Lyft, but because those provide great utility, but like whether or not there's Street View on Google Maps, I know how to get around an example. Like that added like visual thing doesn't quite add any utility yet. So I think once they unlock that of what's the utility of Street View, for example, then you'll maybe see it continue to spread and become really cultural norm.
Can you talk about like just the willingness you had to take the risk of not joining like corporate America right out of graduating, which is what like 99.9% of like kids our age want to do, and really like taking that risk of just leaping into something and trying to create something and being a founder.
Yeah. So a little bit about my story real quick. I was headed to med school actually, and I spent the summer before med school building an app. Classes were starting in a week. My parents asked me a tough question, like, you sure you want to go to med school? And I realized I had way more fun this summer building the app than any like pre-med experience I had. So I dropped out, and really it came down to that question of, did I have more fun doing this than doing that? And the answer was yes. And also realizing there's no better time than graduating to go start something or work at a startup, for example. You don't have a mortgage probably, no family. It's like now is the time to take a risk. Those big companies, Microsoft, Google, like Dell, they'll always be there, and you can always get a good job. If anything, they know when you go to a startup, you're gonna get more hands-on experience and be more valuable to them. So that's what I'd say. It's definitely worth the risk.
One more question.
So to go into a bit more detail about that, that decision, was the app that you made related to Yik Yak, or did you decide to drop and say, okay, let me build something, and then you started like searching for something to build, or like did you have Yik Yak on the back of your mind?
So Yik Yak actually came about pretty randomly. I was working on a separate app, and we're like, what else can we build just to get a lot of things out there in the wild? And Yik Yak was a random idea I had. It stemmed from a problem I saw on campus where, there was a couple popular Twitter accounts, and only they could communicate with everyone on campus. And I was like, why can't everyone just make it more open? Why can't everyone just talk to everyone? And so that was the idea for that. But really, I had an idea, not Yik Yak, a different idea. Started working on that, had a ton of fun, and I was like, I want to keep doing this. And then Yik Yak was a later idea. So, cool. Awesome. Thanks, y'all.